Welcome back to the 480 podcast. I'm Jacob Fredericks. In today's episode, we're going to discuss what are the real problems with the Arizona Cardinals and how did those problems lead to their Cardinals blowout loss against the Green Bay Packers, and a look into what we can do to improve going into next week's matchup versus the LA Chargers. All right, so going into this game, I expected the Cardinals to have a very tough task after beating the Niners, going into Green Bay to try and get a win against the Packers, a 10 a.m. game in Arizona time. That's usually the kind of game that the Cardinals have struggled in, and they did. They lost 34-13. It was not really that close of a game, and I have plenty of problems with the Cardinals' performances and some actual football stuff, but I have all these notes with some stats here that I want to discuss, but I want to put these aside for a second, and I just want to speak as a fan of the Arizona Cardinals, as a fan of this team who loves this team with his whole heart, to the organization and just to the fans in general. I think this team needs to start being held accountable. And I started to see that this week in the media. The media is starting to finally hold Arizona Cardinals accountable. The Arizona Cardinals have made the playoffs 6 times in 36 years since moving to Arizona. 6 times in 36 years. We have 9 playoff wins. That's not acceptable for our fans. We are now a team and an organization that has the resources, has the money to be able to go win and go compete at a consistent level. And I think that's what I'm feeling, and that's what a lot of other fans are feeling as well. Is frustration that we can never put together a consistent run of games that we're winning, a consistent winning record. There's always something every year that causes the season to debacle. Or I understand there's going to be years that we're not going to be as good and we're going to have rebuilding years. That's okay. But it's become a culture where it's a rebuilding year every other year. And I think me as a fan and other fans are just almost exhausted for just the lack of consistency. And speaking of consistency, it has been 1,088 days since the Cardinals last won back-to-back games. And I think that's, again, where some of this frustration from me and other fans is coming from, is that we haven't seen it in the last few years, that consistency, when we've had the teams to be able to win a lot of games. We have had teams that are good enough to go compete for an NFC championship or to win a playoff game or two. But we haven't seen it. The Cardinals haven't put the last time the Cardinals put a consistent run of games together was under Bruce Arians when we went to the NFC Championship and then unfortunately, heartbreakingly lost to Carolina. And since then, it's been, we're rebuilding. And then we have to rebuild again. And I understand that we have had mistakes been made and we're trying to correct them. But I think this team and the media and the fans have to not accept that anymore. I think as a whole, we've got Arizona Cardinals fans, and myself included, have gotten almost used to just losing. Arizona sports in general has not been have not had a lot of winning teams throughout history, and so I think fans have almost gotten used to it. But I think it's time that ends. I'm kind of almost sick of being used to losing. It's time to win. We have the resources. We have the money. It's time to win now for this team. I understand that we still have pieces that need some work, but it is time to win and put consistency back in this team. The Cardinals have spent 28th. We're 28th in money spent in the last 4 years in the NFL. We're in the last 4 years as well. We are 29th, in our record in games. It correlates. There has to be more investment into the team from all the way from the owner, the GM, coaches, the players, and the fans. There has to be more buy-in, and there has to be more pressure and more accountability for this team. I think the media this week is finally starting to hold this team accountable for what we know that they can be. We know that they can be a top team that's competing in this league for Super Bowls, for playoff wins, but they just haven't been that yet. We know they have the potential. It's there. We've seen it. but it's got to come on the field, and it's got to come soon. So I would love to see something similar to what the Suns did years ago, where the owner sat down at a town hall and talked to fans, talked to passionate fans who really care. And I would love Mr. Bidwell to just sit down. I would love to have a conversation with him about the direction of this team and what the fans think needs to improve, and what he thinks that he can do to improve this team. And I think that we can have a culture that is a winning culture without being a toxic fan base. We don't want to be like the Philly fan base or the Boston fan base, but we need a fan base that holds this team accountable and holds this team to wanting to win. This team has to start winning, because the days of us winning were amazing. I remember I was 2 years old when we went to the Super Bowl in 2009. 2 years old. And I remember that playoff run. I remember watching that Super Bowl and being so excited when Larry Fitzgerald ran the slant route, took it to for a touchdown. I thought we were going to win the Super Bowl, and that was the best feeling ever as a 2-year-old. Not even really knowing what's going on, but I can see the excitement. I had Cardinals fans all around me. They were almost in tears of joy thinking we were going to win the Super Bowl. And then I remembered the heartbreak that I've felt as an Arizona Cardinals fan for years. It's always, we're so close, but yet we're so far. And it's hard as a fan. It's frustrating as a fan. It's exhausting as a fan to see that consistently, to get your hopes up and then for it to fall. So I'm ready for this team to start getting my hopes up and then delivering on that. I'm ready for this team to win a Super Bowl. This team can win a Super Bowl in the next 4 years if there's real accountability with the team for when they're not performing well, for all the way from the owner to the GM to the coaches to the players and even to the fans and the media. There has to be accountability from everybody to make sure that this team can win games. And I really think that this Cardinals team is a couple pieces away, a couple years away, a couple of really good investments away from being an elite team in the NFL that's going to win not just one Super Bowl, multiple Super Bowls. The Cardinals could be the next great NFL franchise if we just come together and just hold this team more accountable and invest more as a team, as fans, as players, as coaches. And I'm not saying that they don't want to win, because I know that the coaches, the players especially, and the owner, they want to win. They do not want to lose. But I think that there's been mistakes that have been made in recent years that has led to a culture of losing for the Arizona Cardinals. And so I'm ready for that to end. All right, so now we will get into the game against the Packers. And in this game, we weren't good enough in this game. I think on defense we really struggled. The secondary really struggled. Sean Murphy-Bunting did have a rough game, along with Max Melton also had a rough game. Our secondary was just not. It wasn't holding up against these Packers wide receivers who are very underrated. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, very good wide receivers, very underrated in the scope of the NFL. But I think the Packers actually have a very good receiving corps, but the Cardinals corners and safeties really struggled in this game. But I think part of that was the scheme going into this game, which is the Cardinals did not send pressure at Jordan Love. Too many four-man rushes. All three of Jordan Love's first half touchdown passes, he had an open pocket where he had time to sit and throw the football. It wasn't like he had to get the ball out quick. He was able to sit in the pocket and deliver absolute strikes. And that's hard for any secondary. If a quarterback has that much time, it's hard for any secondary to hold up against really good receivers. So the Cardinals, I think, have to start putting pressure on quarterbacks. More blitzes. I understand if some analytics say that that certain quarterbacks are better against pressure and they might actually be better just sitting off. But I think it was evident in this game that you can't do that. You can't allow a young secondary who is struggling because a lot of them are rookies. A lot of them have never played in this league, and you can see that they're growing, they're getting better, but you have to give them some sort of slack. You have to make it easier on them. Just like when you have a rookie quarterback, you usually want to get a good tight end because it's a nice outlet for him. These corners have to be put in a situation that's good for them. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to develop and never going to be able to be the elite corners that we know they could be. And so I think there has to be starting to be more pressure put on opposing QBs. I think on the offensive side, I think we were unlucky. I think three turnovers. You cannot have that in a football game. The amount of penalties we had, some of them questionable, to be honest with you. I wasn't completely happy with the officiating, as I don't think any NFL fan was this week. I think all NFL fans across the board can agree that the officiating this week was pretty subpar. But I think that on the offensive side, you can't turn the ball over 3 times, but that's luck. The difference is the defense in this game just couldn't get. You have to be able to rely on your defense to get some stops, and they did get a turnover, or they did get 2 interceptions. But it has to be earlier in games before we go down 17-0, before we go down 24-0. It has to be earlier in the game where we're getting stops. And then on the offensive side, obviously you can't turn the ball over. But I think some of the problems in this game were some of the Cardinals' offense has become a little bit too predictable, in my opinion. I think that for example, every time we took Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the game, we ran the ball. Now I understand maybe he's not. You want a blocking wide receiver in there, but I think we have to mix it up a little bit where we do run the ball with him in there, because otherwise opposing defenses are going to notice it, and maybe they have noticed it. And the other thing, speaking of Marvin Harrison Jr., is I think we have to run some different route trees to be able to get him open. We send him on a lot of go routes, and he can get some separation. But right now, with their injuries on the O-line, Kyler Murray doesn't have enough time to sit in the pocket and be able to deliver a 60-yard go ball. We have to be able to have more creative plays to get our wide receivers open. I think, but it's not, and I've heard in the media this week, after this week's game, that it's time to look at trading some players, start being sellers at the deadline. I disagree. It is absolutely not time to give up on this team. We have to remember, this team is 2-0 in the division. We are 1 game out of taking. If we had won this game, we would have taken the lead in the NFC West. Think about that. We are 1 game away from taking the lead in the NFC West. As bad as we think that some of this season started, as inconsistent as this team has been, we are 1 game away from possibly taking the lead in one of the toughest divisions in football. So I think it is absolutely not time to sell players at the deadline. It is time to buy players at the deadline with some draft picks. And I think it is time to try to win this year. I truly believe that this team, if they can put together a consistent run of games, can sneak into the wild card can sneak to win the division. And then once we get in the playoffs, you never know. This team can compete with anybody. So I think it's not time to give up on this team. I think, as I alluded to earlier, there has to be some changes as an organization, as a whole, and not just this year, but as a whole in general, so we can get, even if we do make the playoffs this year, we can continue that and be consistent and get better and better and better and become one of the elite teams in the National Football League. But it is absolutely not time to give up on this team yet. And so let's move along to the upcoming game against the Chargers. What can the Cardinals do to improve on a very lackluster performance against the Packers? I think one, obviously on the offensive side, some different routes, some different schemes. We have Zay Jones back on the active 53-man roster. Marvin Harrison Jr. is unfortunately questionable with concussion. We're hoping he's going to play, but I would not rely on it. I would rather him have to sit a game to fully get healthy. Concussions are no joke, and we need Marvin Harrison Jr. for years to come. So I think with Zay Jones being back, I think we're going to have to draw up some different kinds of plays, some different route combinations that can get our receivers open, get more creativity. Because Kyler Murray is actually a top 8 quarterback in total QB rating. So it's not Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's actually had one of his best seasons with Arizona so far. But there's something that's just missing. There's a couple little things that are just missing from this offense, and this offense will be booming if they can get it figured out. I think on the defensive side, we have to get more pressure on the quarterback. I understand Justin Herbert is a very good quarterback against pressure. He's one of the best in the league against pressure. But we don't want to give him an open pocket either, especially with the secondary that is struggling, and now with Sean Murphy bunting out is even lower because of possibly injury. So we really, really need to get pressure on Justin Herbert, make him get the ball out quickly. We have the best tackling safety in the National Football League in Budda Baker. Let him make tackles. Let them throw 3-yard slant routes and let Budda Baker come do what Budda Baker does and make tackles. We're going to have to stop the run game. They have one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. They've been using J.K. Dobbins very well. Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. You can see how much he's improved since his days with the San Francisco 49ers. The Chargers are one of the best coach teams in the NFL. So I do think it'll be a difficult task for the Cardinals in this game. And to be able to get a result on Monday Night Football, on primetime, on ESPN+, which the Cardinals in general, in past years, have a little bit struggled on primetime. But I think this is a good matchup for them on the offensive. They have a good defense. Jim Harbaugh is obviously a defensive coach. But I think if we get the offense clicking this week, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. is playing, I think the Cardinals could have a very good bounce-back performance and get us right back in the division and right back in the discussion on whether we could be a wild card team or not. Thanks for listening to the 480 podcast. I'm Jacob Fredericks, and I'll catch you guys next week.